Imagine standing on the ground and watching a bird soar overhead, wondering if humans would ever share the skies. For most of history, flight was only a dream, a metaphor for freedom, escape, and even divinity. Yet, in just over a century, air travel has gone from an impossible fantasy to one of the most common ways we connect across the globe. Today, we'll journey through that story, the history of travel. Along the way, we'll explore not just the planes, but the people, the passengers, the flight attendants, the cost, and the way the experience of flying has transformed from a glamorous luxury to an everyday necessity. Hello all, my name is Julia and I am a flight attendant for a US major airline and I am obsessed with travel, so this is my travel YouTube channel. Sit back and relax while I introduce you to this channel, firstly with the history of air travel. Long before airplanes, humans dreamed of flight. The Greeks told the story of Icarus, who built wings of feathers and wax. In China, kites lifted children into the air as early as the 5th century. And by the 1400s, Leonardo da Vinci was sketching designs for flying machines that looked like mechanical birds. The first real success came with balloons. In 1783, in Paris, the Montgolfier brothers launched the first hot air balloon. The first passengers, you ask? A sheep, a duck, and a rooster. People soon followed. For the first time, humans floated above the earth, though without control. They went wherever the wind carried them. It wasn't until December 17th, 1903 in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, that humans achieved powered control flight. Wilbur and Orville Wright, bicycle makers from Ohio, launched their fragile wooden machine, the Wright Flyer, into the air for 12 seconds, covering 120 feet. It didn't make headlines right away. In fact, when they offered to demonstrate their invention to newspapers and governments, many shrugged it off as a stunt. But in time, it was clear. The Wright brothers had opened the skies forever. By 1914, planes were being used in war. At first, pilots carried cameras, not weapons. But soon, rival pilots carried pistols, then mounted machine guns, and then the era of dogfights was born. No, not those type of dogfights, but these dogfights were close-range, chaotic aerial battles between fighter planes, typically involving maneuvering, turning, and twisting to gain a tactical advantage. Per Google, of course. It's giving Top Gun in my opinion, but my opinion is only based on the very, very, very few trailer clips that I've seen. I've never actually seen a Top Gun movie. Aviation was still primitive, but the First World War pushed it forward with better designs and engines. After World War I, aviation captured the public imagination. The 1920s and 30s were filled with daredevil stunts, record-breaking flights, and celebrity pilots. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic alone in his Spirit of St. Louis, and when he landed in Paris, over 100,000 people swarmed the airfield to greet him. Fun fact about Charles Lindbergh, his son Charles Lindbergh Jr., of course, was kidnapped from his nursery and held for ransom. The Lindberghs did pay the ransom, only to find their son unalived in a wooded area weeks later. This was a part of a whole slew of kidnappings that people were doing at that time in order to get money from wealthy people or people that they assumed to have at least a little bit of money. So that really wasn't a fun fact, but I thought I'd throw that in there because I love to learn about little random interesting things like that. Anyway, a few years later, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, cementing herself as an icon of courage and possibility. Meanwhile, commercial aviation began. In 1914, the first scheduled airline flight carried one paying customer across Tampa Bay, Florida. This airline was the St. Petersburg Tampa Airboat Line, and the person was Abraham Fell, the former mayor of St. Petersburg. The ticket cost $5, about $150 today. So that's not too bad, not too bad. I could swing that, but the flight was only 23 minutes. In the 1920s and 30s, flying coast to coast in the US could cost what would now be thousands of dollars. Only the wealthy could afford it. But for those that could afford it, they were treated like royalty. Cabins had armchairs, sometimes even beds. Imagine an armchair being a luxury. Meals were served on white tablecloths with silverware, and passengers often dressed in suits and gowns. Flying wasn't just transportation, it was a status symbol. I can imagine the stuck-up wives now being like, oh, you had to drive an entire hour to get here? I'd rather die. Me and the hubs, of course, got here in 20 minutes through aeroplane. I'm not good with accents, so I hope you enjoyed that. And then came the stewardess. My time to shine. In 1920, Ellen Church, a registered nurse, became the first female flight attendant. Could you guys imagine passengers having to come on board, put up their own luggage, buckle their own seatbelts, and go from point A to point B without being served a Coke in a 4-ounce cup with no pretty girls to gawk at? I'm clutching my invisible pearls. Airlines quickly realized the value. Stewardess reassured nervous passengers and gave an air of elegance. But the job came with strict rules. In the 1930s and 40s, flight attendants had to be unmarried women under 25, weigh less than 115 pounds, and stand under 5'4". Well, all of those would have taken me out of the game. So I guess thank you to equal and seemingly, to me, basic rights, I get the privilege to sling another bag of peanuts. They couldn't marry or even wear glasses on duty. Airlines advertised them as a symbol of beauty and grace, oftentimes more than they advertised the planes themselves. One United Airlines ad from the era read, "Fly the friendly skies with the girls who really care." It sounds shocking today, but back then, stewardess were part of the glamour package. And I mean, with paying all that money, I better have some eye candy. World War II shifted aviation again. Fighters, bombers, and cargo planes filled the skies. Innovations like radar, pressurized cabins, and jet engines emerged. By the end of the war, aviation had advanced by decades. After the war, the new engine entered civilian life. The British de Havilland Comet debuted in 1952, followed by the Boeing 707 in 1958. These planes were faster, smoother, and able to cross oceans with ease. But flying was still costly. A round-trip ticket from New York to London in the 1950s cost the equivalent of over $3,000 today. I would have most certainly been staying home. Passengers often saved for months to afford the journey. They dressed for the occasion. They better had. Men in suit and ties, and women's in dresses and pearls. The cabin experience matched the price tag though. Seats were wide, legroom was generous, and food was served in china with silver cutlery. Some planes had spiral staircases to upper lounges, cocktail bars, or even pianos on board. Flying was an event, not just transportation. And the stewardess became cultural icons. But behind the glamour was hard work. Flight attendants were responsible for passenger safety and often performed physically demanding duties, all while maintaining strict appearance standards. Some airlines required flight attendants to retire by age 32. The Boeing 747, which I believe is still around now, my airline doesn't fly them personally, but I feel like those are still flying. Anyway, this plane was introduced in 1970 and was a game changer. Known as the jumbo jet, it could carry hundreds of passengers, which slashed ticket cost. Suddenly, international travel wasn't just for the rich. It became accessible to middle-class families. In 1978, U.S. airline deregulation transformed the industry. Before, the government controlled ticket prices and routes. Airlines competed on service, which is why in the past the experience was so glamorous. After deregulation, airlines were free to set their own fares and routes. And I just want to say, of course, the government was responsible for the unaffordable ticket prices. Like, was anybody surprised that they were behind it? No one. Exactly. The result of this, ticket prices plummeted. Flying became affordable for millions of people, but the luxury began to fade, of course. Airlines cut costs by shrinking seats, serving simpler meals, and reducing perks. The stewardess role evolved as well. By the 1980s, they were no longer hired for glamour, but trained professionals, men and women, focused on safety. The old image of sky girls in designer uniforms gave way to the modern flight attendant. A safety expert first, a service provider second. By the 1990s and 2000s, budget airlines like Southwest, Ryanair, and EasyJet pushed the trend even further. No free meals, fewer frills, but tickets that cost less than a train ride. But they do give tiny bags of pretzels with 3 parts air and 1 part pretzels. Come on. That's more than enough. Air travel had gone from rare and glamorous to routine, sometimes frustrating, but always accessible. And so with travel becoming more accessible, you know the rich always have to find a way to be separate from the rest and flaunt their wealth. And with that became first class in business. Luxury lived on, thank God. Flatbed seats, chef designed meals, and private suites recalled the glamour of the past, but only for those who could pay, of course. By the early 2000s, air travel was part of everyday life, but the September 11th attacks in 2001 reshaped the passenger experience. Suddenly, security lines were longer, restrictions tighter, and the sense of glamour gone. Yet the ticket prices were at historic lows. I mean, I wouldn't blame anybody for completely opting out of flying post 9/11. I personally haven't flown to or through the DCA airport since the tragedy that happened earlier this year. And for that reason, a transatlantic flight that once cost several $1,000s could sometimes be found for just a few hundred. Today, aviation faces new challenges and possibilities. Electric planes, hydrogen fuel, and flying taxis are being tested, which kind of sounds a little terrifying. Supersonic passenger jets like the Concorde once was may return, and private space travel blurs the lines between flying and space exploration. As always, ticket costs and passenger experience will evolve with the technology. It's not a question of if it'll change, it's how. In just over a century, we've gone from fragile biplanes sputtering into the air for seconds to jets carrying millions across continents every day, including myself and probably a lot of you watching. The story of air travel isn't only about machines, it's about people. The wealthy passengers who once treated flying like a fashion show, the stewardess who embodied glamour and resilience, and the billions today for whom flying is just a part of life. From silk gowns to sweatpants and bonnets and pajamas, from champagne and crystal glasses to plastic cups. Actually, the cups are made of bamboo now, so get it right. The journey of air travel is the journey of humanity itself, constantly changing and always aiming higher. As long as we keep looking up, the history of flight is far from over. And that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this tale of air travel. If you have any suggestions on topics that you would like me to discuss in the future, go ahead and leave a comment down below in the comments section. Also, on your way out, if you enjoyed this video, which you made it to the end, so you must have, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe on your way out. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. I hope I wasn't blurry the entire time.